My theory to strategy is very simple. If Bitcoin is the biggest and most dominant asset in the world, isn't it logical that the company with the most Bitcoin will be the most valuable company on planet Earth, or at least one of the most valuable companies on planet Earth? And with strategy being very far away from that, there is a huge return baked into the stock. And so they asked Adrian Morris, one of the OG MSTR True North guys, what he thinks about the treasury company space and MSTR strategy especially. Enjoy.
What's your core thesis on strategy, on Stretch, and all the preferreds that they have?
So when it comes to strategy, the core thesis, if I had to really simplify it, is that they are a company that now has over 760,000 Bitcoin. When I first got into it, they didn't even have 100,000 Bitcoin. And watching the growth over the last 5-6 years has been really impressive. And if I had to distill the thesis down to one talking point, it would be that if Bitcoin is going to succeed, if we are correct as Bitcoiners that Bitcoin is going to succeed and it's going to become the preeminent asset in the world, or one of the preeminent assets of the world, then it stands to reason that the company that holds the most Bitcoin and that can financialize Bitcoin the most effectively would be a huge success as well. And I think that is the simplest way to talk about strategy, and then the actual thesis behind it. They are a company that has been acquiring Bitcoin. They have been financializing Bitcoin. And because of the nature of equities, they tend to trade at a premium to their net asset value of their Bitcoin holdings. And those pieces are what tend to attract investors into strategy. Of course, you have individuals that are chasing, number go up, right? But people like myself, people like the other gentlemen in True North, people perhaps like yourself, would perhaps be more inclined to invest in strategy because of the underlying Bitcoin thesis that's driving it.
This is so interesting because I have been so impressed by how many Bitcoin they have been accumulating. I remember not that long ago where we have been discussing on the podcast if they can ever get to 1% of the Bitcoin supply. Not even like when, like we've discussed if they can ever do that. Now they had like 3.5 or so, and I'm fairly confident that they can get to 4%, 5%, maybe even like 10%, like around the 2 million Bitcoin mark. It's still kind of hard to me to think about how many Bitcoin they can actually accumulate and where's kind of the top. I mean, the most natural top is 21 million, I guess, but there's probably a limit before that at some point. But it's really like I'm massively impressed by how many Bitcoin they can just accumulate with so many interesting strategies, and there's no competition. It's great. Like the second biggest one has like what 40,000 Bitcoin or 100, like I don't even know, like 50,000 or so. Like like a lot less Bitcoin than strategy.
Yeah, and so part of that is the first mover advantage, right? They were the first company to adopt a Bitcoin strategy, and they were able to accumulate Bitcoin when it was much lower, right? So during the bear market of 22 and 23, they were still they were there, and people were thinking they were going to get liquidated and all of that, right? We know all the talking points. So a lot of that is the first mover advantage, and because of the first mover advantage, they may have an unassailable position as the number one corporate holder of Bitcoin. I think that unless someone in the Mag 7 were to get involved, no one's going to be able to catch that number. And even if that were to happen, even if someone in the Mag 7 were to get involved, that would cause the price of Bitcoin to completely blow out, and they'll be constantly chasing the bid all the way to the top. So I don't think that's going to happen. And that by itself at some point is going to command a different kind of premium for the market, but that's going to take some time for Bitcoin to be more broadly adopted globally, and for Bitcoin to adopt a more, or for Bitcoin to develop a more durable narrative. Once those um, events take place, I think that strategy, their position is going to be far more concrete, and it's going to be well well understood by the broader market. But that's still years away. in terms of how they've been able to accumulate, aside from the first mover advantage, they've been relatively focused on the Bitcoin treasury strategy. Just today we saw the marathon sold like what 15,000 Bitcoin, however many Bitcoin it is they sold and even though that they are a minor, it shows that you have companies in the space that are believers and practitioners of the Bitcoin thesis. So what I mean by that is that they believe that Bitcoin is the best asset in the world and they follow through on that, right? While you have others that are whether they are need to sell Bitcoin because they have different operational constraints and they can't hold on to all their Bitcoin, or that you have others that have entered into the space and perhaps don't have as a developed investment and financial capital thesis behind their Bitcoin holdings. All of these things are what separates strategy from the pack and makes them a one of one. So, yeah, we can talk about things in greater detail. And now you have the preferred offerings as well with Stretch. And Stretch has shown extreme resilience. Stretch has shown that it's been well received by the market. So they've added another layer onto the financialization of Bitcoin that didn't exist before. And I think that they're going to continue to innovate.
What do you think is the one thing that will make strategy and maybe also other Bitcoin treasury companies either successful or unsuccessful? Like, what do they have to achieve over the next like 5-10 years to keep on being successful or to like become successful?
Well, in the case of strategy, even if they were to do nothing from this point on and just ride Bitcoin price accumulation, even if the market were to pin them to one x NAV, one x MNAV, they're going to be a tremendous success. The share price is going to blow out, and they're going to be successful. So I think they are. I'm not going to say guaranteed success. I think that they are relatively well on their way to long-term success, assuming the underlying Bitcoin thesis is correct, right? That is always the caveat. We are Bitcoiners, we are Bitcoin believers, so we are fundamentally assuming that the Bitcoin thesis is correct. And because of that, strategy will become successful, right? So that is the base case for success. In terms of what they can do, I think that with the preferred offerings, they've already taken another step towards the financialization of Bitcoin. Now, here's where I would differ from some others in the space that think that they don't need to do anything else. I would actually disagree with that. I think that the market is adaptive and the market is going to demand more from them as time goes on. I don't know if just buying Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin in perpetuity is going to be enough in, indefinitely. I just don't see that as realistic. So I think that the future would be lending on Bitcoin. I think the future could be finding different ways to generate yield on their Bitcoin. I think the future can be different offerings that we perhaps even haven't even conceptualized yet. It could be reappropriating existing offerings, changing their structure, and creating different offerings from them. There's all kinds of different things that they can do that are going to determine their future success. And I think that all those avenues open up for them. I also think that, again, where I'm going to be different, I think that if they're not going to abandon the business intelligence side of the company, they need to develop that as well. And I think that also bodes well for their success in the future. I think that they can truly be a dual model in the sense of they can be a strong analytics company because of the future and the way things are going with AI, but they can also be a strong treasury company as well. I don't think that that is impossible, but they're going to have to make a concerted effort that we have the Bitcoin treasury. We would like to incorporate some of that growth and push some of that growth into the business intelligence side of the house as well. So they have many avenues to become successful to expand their success. In terms of the other treasury companies, so far a lot of them have essentially taken the approach of we see what strategy is done, we're gonna copy that, right? Now, can that work? Perhaps. But I really think that, and this is something I've spoken about at length, the differentiating factor, what is it? If you're just going to copy strategy, well, why wouldn't someone just buy strategy? if you don't have a differentiating factor, so like in the case of MetaPlanet, for instance, they're in Japan, right? That's a differentiating factor, a geographic one. That could be true for other companies like Smarter Web, Capital, so on and so forth. But the companies that are going to succeed are going to need to have a differentiating factor. Now, the challenge with that is as strategy gets bigger and bigger and bigger, that differentiator becomes more nebulous and it becomes less certain. So the reality of it is that the future of this space, the Bitcoin treasury space, I think is going to be strategy's growth. I think there's going to be a lot of mergers and acquisition and consolidation to make bigger companies. And I think that companies that can differentiate besides strategy are going to be the ones that can survive.
And that's also something I always think about with other treasury companies. Like, to be super fair, I focused the last 3 months purely on strategy, on that research. And I will soon post like a full thesis video that like how I think about strategy. And after that, I'll see into the other strategy companies. So I haven't really um, put a lot of effort or time into other treasury companies, just as a preface to my question now. But I always have this question: couldn't strategy just do the thing that they are now doing in America, in Europe, in Asia, in Japan, also with like meta planning? And couldn't they just do that? And because they're the big dog, kind of almost destroy their whole business model. I mean, it sounds a little bit extreme, but like they could be a huge competition also in the Japan market. Like what would stop them to just do that?
I'm not 100% certain, but if I had to like hypothesize, I would say that you have regulatory concerns. Are there any kind of regulatory hurdles that they'll have to clear before they can move into foreign markets? You would also have brand recognition. If they were to move into like Japan for something, for instance, why? How would they be received in contrast to Metaplanet? How would they be different? Are they just going to offer like a Japanese market yen denominated version of all their offerings, or are they going to do something different, right? And you already have MetaPlanet that exists in the market there right now, but this is kind of what I've spoken about in the past, that I think strategy is moving towards becoming systemically relevant and systemically important. So systemically relevant in the sense of, because of their size, because of their footprint, they are now a relevant player in the market. They are now a recognized player in the market. Or, to your point, they may become the market because they're so big. They are just the market for the financialization of Bitcoin. So that's systemically relevant. Systemically important means that Bitcoin has gone to such a size by itself, and Strategy's holdings have gotten to such a size by themselves that they now have become integrated into the plumbing of the traditional financial system. I think that the relevance is the near-term goal. I think importance is the long-term goal. That is what they're working towards. Now, how does that play into what you're saying? If there's a future where, and let's play it out 5 years, right? Let's say that Bitcoin's at a $500,000 or something like that. They have a monstrous market cap, and that's assuming that they don't trade at a multiple. At that point, if Bitcoin is a $500,000, we have a few tacit assumptions with that. We have, of course, more capital in the market, right? We have, of course, more broader financialization of Bitcoin. We, of course, have more recognition of Bitcoin globally and more adoption of Bitcoin globally. And what that means is strategy is going to become a direct beneficiary of that. Now, if in your scenario, they have, let's say, 1,000,000 Bitcoin by that point, and Bitcoin's at $500,000, and they're moving into why wouldn't they move into other markets? What would prevent them from moving into other markets? And would these other companies be large enough to compete with them in those other markets? That is the real question. And I think that is something that they're probably thinking through, but it's premature at this point. But to answer your question and more completely and directly, nothing is stopping them from doing it. Besides regulatory hurdles and whatnot, if we assume that those would not be a long-term barrier, nothing is stopping them from doing it. The real question is, would they be able to handle the expansion into other markets. I think they have to be very, very careful in what and how they're building out, because there could theoretically become a crisis of scale if they keep scaling on the preferreds and if they keep putting a consistent dividend bearing pressure and dividend perhaps pressure is the wrong word. A dividend, just say simply a dividend obligation. If they keep expanding their dividend obligation without being able to offset that in other means outside of the common stock and the common business supporting it, I think that that can get a little bit dangerous if they expand too far too quickly. So all of these things are things that they're probably working through. But if we assume the scale, if we assume the desire, nothing's stopping them. And I think that that's something that's probably going to happen in the future.
So there is a concern of yours that they might that if they do those things that they might grow too quickly. So like in order to do such a massive scale, they should do it carefully, conservatively, and slowly, instead of just like going randomly in all the markets and like expanding their branches. I mean, it's I don't know if branches is the right word, or but like different jurisdictions too fast.
Think of it as their footprint, right? So they have been very, very conservative. They're contrary to what people believe, and when you see the flood online, people talking about leverage and whatnot from the convertible notes and so on and so on, and because of the application and whatnot, that's actually overstated. They're not heavily leveraged. If strategy was irresponsible, they would have taken out far more convertible notes than they did far earlier, but they didn't. So what that means is that they are naturally, just by virtue of how they've been operating, they are being conservative. Now, the point I'm referring to is what I like to think of as a crisis of scale. If you think of Stretch, if you think of the preferred offerings, if they scale that out further, so we have to assume that they're scaling out further because the demand is there. So we have to assume also that Stretch, all the other prefers have the volume here, the volume that exists currently here in the current state to support pushing out in the future state, right? Now, the reason why I call it a crisis of scale is as the preferred offerings scale and as they become more innumerate, the dividend obligation grows in tandem, right? If there is a scenario where you have a growing dividend obligation and the core business, either through the trading volume or whatnot, or the core business can't support that growth, you then are put into a position where they theoretically would have to sell Bitcoin to cover the dividend obligation. Now, that somewhat undercuts the thesis, right? Because I wouldn't think of that as a negative. I would think of that as they're simply adopting to the market and maintaining their capital stack as efficiently as possible. And that may at some point require them to sell Bitcoin, hypothetically. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just giving you the hypothetical. How does the market react to that? Does that undercut the confidence in strategy? Does the market then say, well, now we have to price an additional risk because of these dividend obligations, and then it undercuts the thesis even further? There are all kinds of things to consider. And that's what I mean by they have to be very, very mindful and very, very conservative in how they scale these out into other markets, if they can and if they choose to. But they have shown themselves to be very conservative. They've shown themselves to be very responsible. So while I think that is a tail risk, it is a risk that I do consider when I project forward and I try to model out what can happen with strategy as a company.
Is that why the US dollar cash reserve is kind of a genius move? Because if they always keep it at like 2, 3 years of covering the dividend obligations, those risks are kind of not really there, at least not in the short term. Because if they always keep like enough cash there to not be relying on the ATMs or not be relying on selling Bitcoins, they can always cover those obligations with the US dollar reserve.
Correct. The US dollar reserve, in my view, was a signal to the market saying If there's concern about dividend coverage, we now have 2 years and change, right? That's a very simple way to look at it.
The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relay to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relay, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called MicroStrategy. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With MicroStrategy, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because MicroStrategy is not selling the washer. MicroStrategy is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microstrategy.io.